you've kind of been in this world of the scientific world of like coral pathogens and stuff for a while. What does that kind of look like?
So, kind of started with I was selling coral. It was when like the last endo ban, so torches were like $1,000 a head. I had gotten pretty good at growing coral, so I had invested in some really expensive torches. And then brown jelly happened. Lost them all. Tried my best at the time to save them. This was like before the KFC dip and stuff, so tried my hand at experimenting with antibiotics and things like that. Definitely came back to bite me. So I had taken microbiology recently, and I'm a molecular biology, biotechnology major, and I realized, maybe I have some of the skills where I can actually look at this. So I go to a smaller university. Every single person in my program is required to take a research credit to graduate. So you pair up with an individual professor, so someone that's got a doctorate in any of the biology fields, and you do a research project with them. So I approached one of my favorite professors, and I said, "Hey, how about I do my own research project looking at this? Would you be willing to help me?" And she was like, "Let's do it." And it's been 2 years. Been looking at it. I've read a lot about it. It's been, a very large download of all of the literature out there, and then it's gotten into, practical experiments from that. So yeah, it's really taken off. I've been working on a lot. So it started with brown jelly, but I'm also looking at coral disease pathways writ large. So, that's your RTN, STN jelly. Sometimes you'll get like the white jelly. And I have some thoughts that all of it is kind of a similar served and universal pathway. So that's what I've been looking at. I've got a couple experiments left. Hopefully, if science is on my side and there's a lot of luck involved, I will be able to talk about my results once I graduate. So it'll be in May.
Awesome.
Very cool. And like, it's a super fascinating world, like the microbiology of everything. So let's kind of jump into maybe talk about what makes up a coral, if you want to start there, to bring kind of the beginner average reefer kind of up to speed, like what really is a coral, what are we really keeping in our tank, and kind of break that down to what you've kind of been studying and looking at with that.
Yeah, so the number one concept to understand is that of the holobiont. So, we're looking at that word. Holo means whole, biont refers to life. So it's the total life around a certain organism. So the current conceptualization of coral is not that they are just an animal that may or may not harbor zooxanthellae, depending if they're photosynthetic or not, but rather they're kind of an ecosystem in of themselves. So you've got the coral animal. You typically will have zooxanthellae, which they harbor. Then there's a plethora of microscopic creatures that we do not see, and sometimes we can't even grow. They can't even be cultured. So there's bacteria, archaea, fungi. There's even species of algae that live in the coral skeleton. So endolithic algae. There's protozoans. Basically, every domain of life takes up resident in the coral and plays a central role in some way. It's all the same principles of ecology that apply to a total reef apply as like a microcosm to an individual piece of coral. And each species of coral, each subspecies of corals of the same subspecies in different regions, different island chains, can have different microbial partners that fill those same niches. So it's the kind of this convergent evolution that occurs. So think about how pollinators have independently evolved in every continent on Earth. If there's a food supply available in an environment, a species will evolve to take advantage of that. And the same thing applies with the microbiome of these different corals. So, if they're producing nitrogenous waste, there could be a plethora of different microbial species that can associate with that coral and, utilize that as a food source. So the number one thing to know is, one, the coral is much more than the coral itself. There's a whole community there, and all of them are very important, and it's a very, very hard to maintain balancing act. And two is that community can be variable. So there's not like, here are the microbes you need in your tank. They're just looking at what microbes perform what ecological function, and are those functions in balance when it comes to looking at corals in a disease state, which is something as humans, that's not how we think of disease. We think, okay, I've got COVID. It was the SARS-CoV-2 virus. But with corals, it's a lot more complicated, which I can go into if you want me to. But that's kind of the initial concept, is the holobiont.
Yeah, and that's a little bit different as far as what a lot of us have learned is that you have a coral and they have the symbiotic relationship with zooxanthellae, but that's just a piece of the puzzle, correct?
Exactly. And I mean, the zooxanthellae themselves have relationships with these bacteria too. It's very much an entire ecosystem where they're all interconnected and interdependent on each other. The coral's a central regulator and is kind of like, I guess, the environment that these things live on, similar to how, you have things that live in a rainforest, but it's very crucial.
It's huge. So when it comes to coral disease and stuff, what are some of the most common things that we're going to see in the beginning stages of our reefing journey? What are some of the more common coral diseases?
Yeah, so the easiest way to talk about these is just looking at symptoms, because many different things can cause the same symptoms. So yeah, brown jelly is a big one for any LPS. You're going to see them rotting. It's going to smell terrible. Like just the worst thing ever, completely dark brown. Everything just goes into a poof cloud. There's kind of this like alternative white jelly, which I've not seen a lot of people talk about, but it's something I've observed quite a bit working at different shops. So same thing, but it's a bright white jelly instead of a brown jelly. See it on elegance a lot, like kind of the elegance coral syndrome, late stage stuff that happens. Like Duncan's will get it quite a bit on the stem, and then it'll work upward. It's kind of odd. And then, if you've got any types of encrusters or acros, then you'll see RTN and STN, to where overnight it'll be gone, poof, all the skin just comes off, or it'll be months or even years of a slow decline. Those are kind of the four common ones. There's a lot of other stuff too, though. I mean, there's some very weird, like brown band disease and black band disease that more so affect wild corals, but I have seen symptoms of them on some Cyphastria, like that I got in, that I had in my quarantine tank. And you'll see from like the center out, some of the polyps, there'll be like a band that just dissipates out, where it's almost like STN, but it presents differently because the edge of that is completely pitch black. It almost looks like this layer of jelly around it. So it's almost a combination of these symptoms. But I mean, the warning signs are always going to be the coral's not extending very well. You're going to have a lot of mucus. And those are your first two things to look out for. And just naturally watching and getting used to observing your tank and internalizing, did this coral look like this? Or even taking pictures every so often is a very easy way to track those symptoms.
If you enjoyed this video, then I know you're going to love the full podcast episode. Go ahead and click or tap your screen to watch that. Thank you so much for watching, liking, and subscribing, and I will see you next time on the Coral Reef Talk.